Hi everyone, welcome back to Kristen's Epic Adventures. Today we're going to talk about house rules, which ones my group uses, and why you may want to consider them yourself. So go ahead and subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell so you know when our new videos are posted, and if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. House rules are an option to make your game more fun. Dungeons & Dragons is designed to be creative. You can make it anything you want. There's instructions in the Dungeon Master's Guide to make your own world, your own campaign, craft your own magic items, create your own monsters and spells. So it only makes sense that if you need to tweak some of the rules, whatever's going to make the game more fun for you and your group is just fine. I want to go over with you some of the house rules that my group uses, and I want to hear from you. If you think these are neat house rules, if you think you might use some, or if you have some completely different ones that you use, okay? So the first house rule that we use is for creating characters. Now, we use the rolling method. We roll dice to create our ability scores. But one thing that we do, you normally roll 4 6-sided dice and remove the lowest and add the other 3 up. Well, one thing that we also allow is re-rolling ones first. So you roll your 4 6-sided dice. If any ones come up, you get a chance to re-roll them. Then you remove your lowest. We do that because we have a pretty small group. And while it can be really fun for role-playing opportunities to have a character who has maybe a really low intelligence or really low charisma or strength, we just find that in our game, with only a few players, in the beginning, at low levels, they have a lot higher chance of getting killed and having to make a new character. So that's just an option that we allow when we're creating characters. The next optional rule we use is called flanking. This is actually in the Dungeon Master's Guide under optional rules for combat. What flanking does is when you're using miniatures on a grid to better simulate combat, it allows the attacking creature to have advantage, which remember means rolling 2 dice and taking the higher one, if they have an ally exactly on the opposite side. So it just kind of makes sense. If you were on the creature's left attacking and you have an ally directly on its right, the creature's going to be a little distracted as to what's going on. Or if you're right in front of it and one of your allies is directly behind the creature, it's going to create a distraction for them. So that should actually be able to give you advantage on your attack. Again, that's an optional rule, but because we do like playing with miniatures on a grid for our combat scenarios, we like to include this flanking feature. Now, the players understand that they can get advantage by flanking a monster, but they also know that the monsters are going to get advantage if they can manage to flank them too. So this rule goes both ways. Another house rule we use is downtime activities. And I don't know if you would necessarily call it a house rule, but it's a rules option that's in the player's handbook. And what downtime activities does is it allows the players time to plan for their characters to do something in between adventures. So if we're not going to be able to get together and play for a week or 2 weeks or so, and as long as the characters have ventured back to a town where things can be done, I allow them to do downtime activities. So they let me know in between gaming sessions whether their character would be doing some gambling or some pit fighting, which could earn them some money, whether they'd be carousing around town and rubbing shoulders with the nobles and trying to pick up rumors about their quest, or even whether they'd be crafting a new magic item or crafting a new sword or a new piece of armor. This allows us to talk about the game in between gaming sessions. We often communicate either on a Discord channel or via email about what the characters want to do during their downtime. And then when we get back together, we make any necessary rolls and tally up what they've earned or what they know. The next house rule we use is about leveling up. Now, when your characters go up to the next level, they're going to increase their total amount of hit points that they have available. There's 2 ways you can do this. they can either take one of their hit dice and roll it, which means you may get the maximum roll that's possible on that die, but you also may get a 1. Or you can take an average. So as a house rule, I actually allow the players to choose which method they'd like to do. So I'm not boxing them into doing it either one way or another. They get to choose, and that's something that you can decide for your game, which method you want to use, and just that one, or whether or not you'd actually like them to choose. Another house rule that we use is including feats in our game. Now, feats are kind of like a special talent that your character has. Every so often, when your character levels up, they're going to get a chance to increase one of their main ability scores. But if you're using feats instead, they could choose to get a new feat for their character instead of increasing that score. An example is the lucky feat. That's one of my favorites. This allows the user to have 3 luck points. They could spend a luck point to re-roll some of their dice, and at the end of a long rest, they would get those luck points back to spend again. There are lots of different feats available in the player's handbook, ranging from things that make you better with certain weapons, better with certain armor, maybe certain spells get changed a little bit, all sorts of special talents that your character could choose over increasing one of their main ability scores. Now, going hand in hand with feats is also the option of using the human variant. If you've chosen to be a human as your race, a human gets +1 to all their ability scores because they're kind of like a jack of all trades. But as a variant, you can choose to pick 2 abilities to increase by 1, choose a skill proficiency of your choice, and take a feat right off the bat when you create your character. So if your DM is allowing this option, it's a really great way to change up the way humans are used, and this is one of the options that we use in our games. Okay, our last house rule that we use is one that I didn't find in a book anywhere, one that I found that someone else used in their game when I Googled it and looked online, which is another really good way to find house rules that might fit for your group. This rule is regarding critical hits. Now, you normally attack someone with your 20-sided die. So obviously the highest that die goes is a 20. If you roll a 20 on that die, we call that a critical hit. You're going to do a lot of damage if you can roll a 20 on that die. Now, normally there's 2 different ways to calculate damage for critical hits. You get all the dice together you need for that weapon, and you can either roll them, total them up, and then double it. Or, to begin with, you can roll double the dice. So if your weapon does 2d6 damage, you can roll 4d6 instead, double the dice. What we like to do for critical hits, also because we're a small party, is I like to assume that their first roll did the maximum amount of damage. And then they actually roll the dice for the second part of the damage. So with a weapon that would do 2d6, they would get an automatic 12 damage because that's the most you can get with 2 6-sided dice. And then they would roll 2 6-sided dice and add that to the 12. We found this is a really good way of getting a decent amount of damage in when you have a really small party size that otherwise might get crushed by some basic monsters just due to the size of the party. But again, if the monster happens to roll a critical hit, I make sure the players know the same rule is going to apply to them. Now, you can find a list of optional rules available in Chapter 9 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. So there are optional rules that have to do with gameplay, traveling, and combat. So you can really customize your game. So again, I want to hear from you about if you like these optional rules that we're using, or if you don't, and why, and which ones you're using in your game. And remember to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when our new videos are up, and we'll see you next time.